Good morning, all, or good afternoon, depending where you are. Good evening for some. So, um, thanks for your time and welcome to this session on designing regenerative grazing that works in practice. So, um, I'm Graeme Hand, and I've been doing this sort of since the early 90s, trained with Alan and all that sort of stuff I'll go into in a bit. Um, I manage the Stiper native grasses there up in the top right, and also a member of the Regenerative Agriculture Network at Tasmania, and also there's the Regrarians logo. So thanks to Darren and the Regrarians for having me on and getting this organised and getting to speak to everyone. So I was just going to go through a bit of an agenda. So it's not going to be very sophisticated or in-depth sort of thing. I'm just going to blast through some stuff. So just our story, what I've done, just some of that change and risk and complexity and landscape function that helps explain the point of view that I have about planned grazing and why what are the extremes on both ends. I'll be talking about both ends of the planned grazing or the regenerative grazing extremes, and then just onto what do I see that works in practice, and then just a bit of an add-on sort of what we do with our coaching program, and then Q&A. So hopefully about 45 minutes through that, and then to Q&A until people are too tired to go on. So in the late 80s, early 90s, started holistic planned grazing. I bought a small property and I was trying to work out how to make it work. And I just kept searching. So it was a search sort of to find out, well, why do everything I touch tend to go badly? So, so we'd have thistles, we'd have retained afterbirth, we'd have mastitis. In the middle of winter, we'd have foot problems, and then red-legged earth mite, and then crickets and thistles, and start again. So being a male, I then went for sort of I'm just going to look at how to get rid of the thistles. I'll just focus on one thing. And so just to focus on one thing, and started looking, and then I came across Alan Savory after a bit of a journey, and then went over and trained with Alan in 1996. He was really interested that I came from a Mediterranean type environment, because typically he had poor success with those environments and really wasn't interested in that. Then became an educator, as we call them, or trainer in holistic management, and accredited with the Savory Institute and Holistic Management International. So one of the things that struck me in 96 was that one of the trainers wrote up on the flip chart that that there'd been thousands trained, but less than 5% successful. And I can remember thinking, oh, well, I think I'll do better than that. And I actually didn't. And then I started looking around what to do. And when I got the job with Stiper, it allowed me to, Stiper Native Grasses Association, it allowed me to move across trainers and tribes. And that was very powerful, because you got to see the patterns, not just working with the people that you worked with. And I started to see what were the common denominators and what was going on. Other things that have really helped is sort of Doug Mackenzie Moore's barriers to adoption. What I thought was stopping people being successful wasn't, and complexity, sort of how to manage the complexity. So I think they'll keep coming back through the talk and sort of be clear, I think. So level of change and risk. I typically put up this photo and say I'm not interested in slowing the car down. And I don't think I've ever been clear enough. I really just want to do a handbrake turn and talk and turn around and drive away from the cliff. I'm really not interested in going slowly over the cliff. So if we don't decide to turn around, I'm saying let's put the pedal to the metal and have fun for a while. So which is what I see happening, is that people really are accelerating towards the cliff at the moment. But in terms of level of change, I think that's really important in sort of starting to think about it. This is Professor Stuart Hill's levels of change, and it's about sort of, he talks about, initially we go for efficiency. How do we make something more efficient, you know, use less of it? So a lot of the meat industry change is about, how do I get more kilograms of beef for less CO2 emissions, would be an efficiency. I also think about it in terms of, I think nitrogen's a really good story to tell about these levels of change. So efficiency would be putting a coating on the urea so that it doesn't volatilize or go up into the atmosphere. Oh, I can't see the raised hands, but I'm hoping you're onto that, Darren, in the background.
Yeah, there's nothing as yet, mate. Just yet. If I see anything, I'll
okay,
pop it on.
Thank you.
No worries.
And then level 2 substitution. So I think of that as you decide that it's too toxic to use sort of the coated urea, so you go for composted chicken manure or some sort of substitute. So I think of substitution level as a non-toxic or less toxic aspirin, sort of, to treat the problem. But I'm really going to be talking today about redesign. How do we actually redesign what we're doing so that it actually, you don't need to worry about the nitrogen leaking and acidifying your soil and worrying about legumes. The whole thing with nitrogen and what we're doing is we've broken the planetary boundary for it. We're actually using too much of it. So we need to reduce nitrogen. And the only way to do that is to get the third pathway of bypassing mineralization and putting biological nitrogen straight into the plants. But so they're quite different. One the third one doesn't require the inputs, whereas the other two are, you're still sort of trying to do input agriculture. And that redesign is really that deep level of change that we need if we're going to save ourselves. So so that's the level of change. Then underestimating risk is a really big problem in agriculture. We jump immediately to high risk activities, and I'll keep coming back to this, that we need to escalate from lower risk or very low risk to higher risk. So this is work that's done by Tim Hutchings, Dr. Tim Hutchings. He did his PhD in risk in agriculture as part of his succession plan. So I was lucky enough to spend a flight. I met him on a plane from Wagga to Melbourne, and we got right into this, and then I went and seen him and stuff like that, and he sent me his thesis to proofread and stuff. So yeah, so I really enjoyed it. Maths was well above my level, but so it's about minimizing the losses, not maximizing the production. I usually put in a lot of graphs showing that, you know, we've got the declining terms of trade and stuff, but I wasn't going to bother with that. But we maximizing production, as soon as someone says, I can increase your production, I would be afraid, very afraid. You know, I would run the other way. There's only a few places on the planet that that's a good idea. And I'll come back and explain that. So you want people to be talking to you about profit, not production. So I have that real, I've got my ear tuned to what is it that they're telling me, because as you increase production, you actually increase intensity, which increases risk, which lowers profit. So most of the farms I work with, both in Australia and Brazil and the US, they're actually over the optimum for profit. So they're focused on production and they've pushed it too far. The other thing that I think is really important, that these are the levels of risk in agriculture, the different sorts of risks. These are the main ones. So debt has the biggest impact on a farm business. It makes people make, even with really low interest rates, it tends to make people take highly risky decisions, and it compounds as it goes down. So So it's really one that you've got to manage that debt and try and get to levels of debt that are sustainable, and I'll talk about that later. The next one, seasonal rainfall risk, is the next biggest impact. And how do you design away from that rainfall risk so that you never run out of grass? Grazing only fails if you run out of grass. So how do you design away from that rainfall risk? And then market price is the third risk. And the way to manage that is to have a very, very low cost of production so that you always win. And I'll come back to those in that. But so that was sort of the level of change and risk I just wanted to introduce. And then I just quickly wanted to skim over complexities, because there's a lot of there's a lot of conflicted advice, you know, and there's a lot of advice that is really not much good for people, is what I've found. I used to say to people, you know, graze it well, but don't graze it too hard, or something similar, but don't graze it too well. And there's a real problem with that. Sort of, what are people supposed to do with that? I don't even know what to do with that. So there is conflicting hypotheses out there. So, and if there's conflicting and we can't resolve it, which I believe it's quite easy to do, then it's complex. And so grazing is complex. Managing a farm, putting it all together is complex. So I think we could have solved it by now, but we're not going about it the right way to solve, you know, what is all these different conflicted advice and what works where. So this is, I use Dave Snowden's Cynefin to think about complexity. So this is some work done by Kim Ballestrin. She's an Australian, works with companies and consults with them. So what I've tried to say there is, if you're in the middle and you're conflicted, you've got to work out, well, which way do I go? So what am I going to actually do here? So if the answer is really clear, then it's going to be very simple, and it's going to be work instructions or procedures. It's just going to be documenting stuff, putting it on there. So a lot of the you know, best practice lives here in obvious. If it's complicated, then you're going to need experts. And if the experts can't agree, then it's pretty clear that it's complex. So in the complex, you have to work out what's going to do. So what can you try is really what that complex is about. And if it's chaos, if things are spinning down very quickly, then you've just got to act now. You've actually got to take some action and see how it plays out. So there's no way of getting around that. So I think that's a really good way of thinking about things. I really like complexity. It sort of busts my brain a fair bit, but the one thing that I use to remember whether it's complex or not is that the definition of insanity doesn't apply in the complex domain. It is impossible to do the same thing twice. So that's really important in terms of what advice you get for the grazing. So, but if you remember that you cannot do the same thing twice. If you tried to graze a paddock exactly the same time, the same way as you did last year, it's impossible. The land's changed, the animals have changed, the seasons changed. So that's something that'll keep coming back up through what I'm doing further on. So here's some examples of how I use that. Excuse me. So if, you know, you need to know, so an example of the clear would be just training and work instructions for building the electric fence. How do you put the fence up? So if you were sort of starting some grazing, so you could write that down. You could say what parts you wanted to use. You could give photo standards of how to do it all. And then you could take the person, train them, and then let them go, and away they'd go. If you were then designing the water system and you wanted to be guaranteed that you got 4 litres a second or whatever the flow rate was that you needed at the end, that you wanted that, then I'm saying that's in the expert domain. So you need an expert water engineer. So in that complicated domain, if you want to know how to use a herbicide, design water systems, or legal, tax, all those things, you go and get an expert. That's in the complicated domain. If it's in the complex domain and you're looking at sort of what's that combination of recovery and stock density and plant utilization that suits my farm, you have to put in the safe to fail practice areas or trials. You can't get away from it because it doesn't react like it will anywhere else, because it depends on the previous, it depends on your current, it depends on the microclimate, the soils, everything else. So the only way to work out what's going on with that is to do the work yourself and put in the safe to fail practice areas. They've got to be, and safe to fails just means that they're small enough that if they fail, you still learn something, but it doesn't damage the business. So these need to be off, and they need to be coherent. Do you know, like you could try both extremes of what I'm going to be talking about with the grazing. So you can go to both ends. You can do all that sort of stuff. So, excuse me. Yeah. So as long as they're coherent, I think of this in terms of the bushfire risk in Australia. What should we do? Should we burn more? Should we, promote biological decay? What should we do? I'm saying we need to do the work where we get all the coherent management techniques and do a big trial on it. Do it somewhere safe that we can either light it up ourselves or wait for it to light up and see what happens. There's clear evidence that some areas didn't burn in the States where they were grazed heavily, and all that, put all of them in, but don't argue about which one's right. Should we do this or should we do that? Just go and do the practice areas, because it's conflict that's going to destroy us by stopping us from acting. And then if we're in chaos, I always think about this in terms of animal health. If the animals are sick or dying, you need to act now. And that's that chaos area. In that chaotic domain, you've just got to get on with it. So this is what I'm thinking of when and all businesses have all four, usually, maybe not so much in the chaotic domain, but they'll have simple things, clear, simple things, complicated, and they'll have complex. So you need to know that the solution for each of those is different. I hope that's clear. I've tried to simplify it as much as I can. The thing that I use to judge whether the land's getting better is landscape function. So landscape function was developed by CSIRO, our Commonwealth Scientific and Research Organisation. I can't remember what the I's for. And this is David Tongway training Colin Seiss and myself. And just the other side, just to the west of Canberra, he was training us. So it's a monitoring procedure that uses the soil surface to work out what's going on. So it organises how are the plants arranged spatially, how are they functioning, what's going on. It's revolutionary stuff for thinking about sort of what we do with grazing management, with the water cycle, the mineral cycle, and sort of the solar energy flow. So and community dynamics. So it really is clear that we need to have a monitoring thing, a monitoring technique that produces a number, sorry, not thing. And one of the things that I believe is holding back the adoption of regenerative grazing or planned grazing is that we don't actually have a number or a target to head to, or clear and defined technique, and everyone agrees with it. I'm suggesting that this is a really powerful way of monitoring. It gives you early warning, and it actually provides something you can measure against and demonstrate that you're getting better at it. So the links are pretty simple. So this is you analyze the soil surface for those indicators, and then it produces results for stability or lack of erosion, water infiltration and water holding, and nutrient cycling. So when I'll start with the first one. So just if you want the land not to be eroding, unsurprisingly, it's got to be covered. I don't know any farmer that doesn't know that. I have never met a farmer that doesn't know that. So the soil cover and litter cover. So what are the annual plants that are covering the ground? and what's the litter cover, the plant matter that's sitting on the soil surface, what's going on there. It needs to be 100% all the time. You know, Christine Jones, every one of us always bang on about it, but you typically don't go into farms and see this. So then if you want water infiltration, then you've got to have a lot of each hectare or acre covered with the bases of perennial grass. So that's what that number 2 is there. So how much is each hectare covered with the bases of perennial grass? A lot of the times when you go to farms, it's less than 10%. Alan actually says it in one of his podcasts. He hardly ever sees over 10% base. When we're managing, we're getting between 30 and 60%. So a massive change in that basal cover of perennial grass. And they act like, that large base perennial grasses act like filters for the rain to get into the soil. It needs to be covered as well, and it needs some surface roughness. This is a simplified version. There is other things on the soil, so but that's enough for the sort of in the main ones. So if you want the water to infiltrate into the soil so that we can use it for growing plants, then we need that basal cover, litter cover, and surface roughness. So for nutrient cycling, these are the relationships. So again, it's the basal cover of the perennial grass. Sorry, I keep looking at the questions. And the degree of decomposition of the litter. So if you subtract surface roughness out of that, about 50% of the nutrient cycling comes from that basal cover of perennial grass, and about 50% from the decomposition of the litter. So
excuse me, Graeme. Just had a poignant question there. Basal, could you just explain the basal, please?
Oh, yeah. No, sorry. The question is, when you say basal perennial grass, do you include perennial forbs and legumes in that? No, only the perennial grasses. So,
I think the question was in the Q&A. Sorry, mate. There's two. There's the chat and the Q&A. This one's from Nadia David's asking basal. What does basal actually mean?
Oh, sorry. So yeah. Basal is really, if you get down to measuring it, it's actually, you only measure plants that are greater than 4 centimeters squared. So like almost that 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch. And then how much is, you estimate by measuring a sample, you estimate how much of this paddock's surface is covered by the bases. So it's really just the bases of the perennial grasses. So you need perennial grasses with big bases, and they need to be perennial grasses because it's different root structure in the perennial forbs and the legumes. So we don't include those in it. So it's about the perennial grass. So if you're looking at land health and how to rapidly regenerate it, it's about perennial grass. Everyone thinks I'm just a bit hung up on the perennial grass, but what the research is very clear. That's the fastest, the most profitable, the lowest risk way of regenerating soils. So I'll keep coming back to that. So in total, sort of, so they're the relationships. So it's pretty simple stuff. It's death by PowerPoint, I understand that, but it's really understanding that that's what's driving and that's what you're managing for that allows you to modify and change what you're doing. So this is just another one. This is same soil type, different management. So the one on the left has got better numbers than the one on the right, and that's what you'd anticipate. And actually that was out of a grassland, where the one on the left was from under a perennial grass plant, and then that was between, in the intertussock space, the one on the right. So it's capped, it's got no air in it, it's reasonably stable because that cap's like concrete. So but the water can't get in, and it cycles very, very low nutrient cycling. It can't get any air in it. It's got nothing to drive the biology. It's got no life in it. So it's that sort of difference between those. So it's very practical. they're leading indicators. So landscape function is a leading indicator of what's going to happen in the future. And the first thing you lose when if your management's heading in the wrong direction is you lose that number 4, the decomposition of the litter, that breaking down of the litter. So it'll stop composting in situ. So that's the thing to look for if you want to know, is your grazing going well? Am I increasing in decomposition of the litter or not? So I have this idea in my head all the time. I have this idea in my head all the time that I'm looking at that decomposition of the litter and trying to build it and build it and build it all the time. So people, I always think, look at lagging indicators. So I'm only interested in the leading indicators, and you can miss things by having that sort of focus. But I would look at the decomposition of the litter, because that will create, say, the conditions for earthworms, which I really like earthworms, but they need to be in a leading indicator, not a lagging indicator.
Excuse me, Graeme, just while I've got a breath there. Perennial grasses, basil, bunch grasses. What about grasses such as Bermuda grass, other perennial grasses which are maybe more rhizome based as opposed to bunch grasses? Do you have an opinion there from Julie Gunn?
Yeah, hi Julie. Yeah, the runner grasses, you know, they do work and they're pretty good, but you actually need to start shifting them back so that you have a combination of runner grasses and tussock forming grasses. So you need that combination. Usually most people are keeping runner grasses as runner grasses, keeping it at that state because of too frequent of defoliation or too frequent of grazing. So it keeps the plants there. So yeah, there's other questions there, but
well, there's a question from Mark Biaggi. Decomposition of litter. Can you have too much litter? If so, what is the cause?
You can have too much litter that's not cycling. It's not possible to have too much litter if it's cycling properly. Yeah. And usually, if the litter's not cycling, it's floating. It's not in contact with the soil, so it just needs pushing onto the ground with the feet of the animals. So hard hooves are regenerative if standing on litter and perennial grass plants that are fully recovered, and incredibly damaging if they're standing on bare ground or between the plants. Surface roughness, Dory, was it's just over each metre you just estimate sort of what's the difference. So you know, where you have really big bunch grasses, tussock forming grasses, it's really rough to drive over. That's usually like 25 millimetres. You need about 8 millimetres surface roughness between the lowest point and the highest point over that metre. So I'll go a bit more into that. Yeah, someone had done the visual soil assessment. I think it's a lagging indicator, most of those. I believe that landscape functions ahead of that. I know Kirk's bullseye, and I think it's really good, and people really like the presentation of it. I just think it needs a bit more focus on sort of only heading towards the conditions we need. There's a few things in there that are lagging and leading indicators, and I think that people are overwhelmed, and we need to try and make it as simple as possible. So if you're starting, I'd start with LFA.
Yeah. That also, with the work that's been done with the Savory Institute's ecosystem outcomes verification protocol, which includes Gadzia's work, it includes Tongwei's work, etc. But like you say, when we're starting out, it's really good to have just some really simple key indicators.
Yeah, and I've got an example of the form that I use, and if people want, I'll send it around with the PowerPoint notes as well.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thanks, Graeme.
And also, yeah, I'll talk about that later, but also the corrective action or what to do next. So the next bit was on sort of, I was going to go bowl straight into what I believe are the two extremes of planned grazing. Some of this ideas of forced variation or deliberately mixing it up, you know, like having different recoveries, different stock densities and things like that. How long a recovery, what stock density and what level of plant utilisation. I believe they're the areas that are conflicted, and what people are arguing about and giving, well, contrary advice to people. So um, let me see. Yeah, so this is, I've tried to call the two grazing management extremes. So these are sort of both ends of the regenerative grazing. So I'm not talking about continuous grazing or set stocking. I'm talking about people that are moving animals around, and what are they doing. So I've called them low impact, high frequency, and high impact, low frequency. So in some of the USDA literature, they use high impact, low frequency. So, and I've got a reference later on. But so I'm in the high impact, low frequency camp, and there's other people in the low impact, higher frequency. So I've dropped the higher, but lower and higher. But at the extremes, they have low impact, high frequency, going around the farm sort of quite a few times, 6 times, 5 times, even sort of 5 to 4 times a year. So, and then they talk about in that low impact, high frequency, mixing it up. Like never have the same recovery time, always do something different. Fast growth, fast moves. I'm going to argue that that doesn't work, and I'm going to try and explain why that doesn't work. The other one is that the populist view at the moment is eat a third from the Kreider research. That doesn't work either. And I'll try and justify these. And then the same with the stock density. So it's got a very much a forced variation was how I thought of it in my mind, but I'm not sure those words work. But they try and force variation. And I'm saying, like my brain tells me that if in complexity you can't do the same thing twice, why do you have to mix it up? Why do you have to force variation? There's enough happening all the time. Some of the people I'm working with, they're planning on 12-month recoveries, and the standard line will always be, if I do 12-month recoveries, I'll come back to that paddock at exactly the same time next year. And I say, if you plan for 12 months recoveries, I can guarantee you will not be back there at the same time next year. Things happen along the way. You'll either have to move them on because it's too wet, or they get through a fence. There will be a reason that you just cannot do that. So on the other side, I'm saying I'm going to give you a technique to work out what the perennial grass recovery time is on your place. And I've got the plus there because you actually also need to add on a buffer depending on how quickly you react to conditions. So what I stand to see in Australia is that it'll stop raining for a month. And people go, oh, it stopped raining. Is it going into a drought, or is it going into a dry spell, or what's happening? Oh, I'll just wait another month. And then they go, oh, it is dry. Now I'll sell something. And then they go, oh, I better organize the agent or the truck, or how am I going to sell them stuff? So people will burn sort of that 6 to 8 weeks just after the conditions have changed. So you've got to get the you've got to actually allow for, sorry, that was 8 to 10 weeks. You've got to allow for the time the grass takes to recover from your safe to fail practice areas, plus that how quickly do you react. I'm saying that we need to eat as deep as possible, that it doesn't work to just try and eat the top third. And I'm saying maintain high stock density all the time, because that's what the evidence from mimicking nature is for me.
Excuse me, Graeme. Just a couple of quick ones there. From Julie, is low impact, high frequency what Ian Mitchell-Innes and Greg Judy teach?
Ooh, possibly. I was trying not to name names, but I actually, well, I actually see there's sort of like two teams sort of going around the planet talking about grazing. The main team with all the footballers in it, with all the people in it, is the low impact, high frequency populist view. The other one, the high impact, low frequency crew, would be Johan Zietzman, Jaime Elizondo, and myself. I don't see a lot of other people going around talking about the one on the right. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's interesting. The evidence that I've seen around the planet is that a lot of people who have shifted from the low impact, high frequency to high impact, low frequency have got exactly the results that you've talked of. The other question there is high rain. This is from Hugh Trevor Jones, who's up near Byron Bay there.
yeah.
High, and a Regrarians member. Thank you for joining us. High rainfall subtropics, 20 to 40 day recoveries. How does that? So I think that's as a question. If we're in the Byron Bay area, which is high rainfall subtropics,
Yeah.
what do you think about 20 to 40 day recoveries?
Oh, I don't think it sounds anywhere near long enough. The more rapid the decomposition, the longer the recovery. So this is what I was talking to with Alini in Brazil.
Yeah.
That you've actually got to grow more litter in those environments because the conditions mean that it gets burnt quicker. So the point, though, is what I'm trying to not do is I'm trying to get people to think about the complexity of this. Asking a question like that's pretending that I'm an expert in your environment, and it doesn't work. That's the whole thing that I'm trying to get across, is that I cannot answer that question, but I can give you a process to work out what it is for you. So the reason people, I believe, aren't progressing like they should be is because they're not following, or they're not being taught this is the process to work out what works on my land. But that sounds way too short for me. But I don't live at Byron Bay, so.
Well, and this is where you get into your practice area suggestion anyway, Graeme. So Declan McDonald, hi Declan, a long time no see. I assume it's the same guy from Tassie, who I worked with years ago. How is eat as deep as possible different to leave a third? Well, that's a utilisation question.
Yeah, so that utilisation, Declan. Hi, Declan. Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't read the other questions. So they're quite different. What people are trying to do is it's this whole idea of leaving the solar panels, so only taking the top third of the grass off. So they'll take them before it's fully grazed. They'll take them off while they've still got leaf area, and it's due to the Kreider research. Frank Kreider, I've got the research coming up later, but what it found was that if you took more than about half of each grass plant, that you got a long time delay in the plant starting to regrow its roots. And everyone goes, oh, you got more root death, so therefore we don't want to do that. So that's the research that's driving it. It was done quite a while ago, and it actually doesn't work in practice. So that's what I'm trying to get to explain, Declan. So I'll come back to that.
The other part there was why not? This is from Siobhan Griffin in New Zealand, I gather. Why not high impact, high frequency for high rainfall areas like New Zealand? I think that's probably similar to the response to Hugh.
Yeah, if we'll be looking at Siobhan, how that applies for these different areas.
So. And then from Jane in the Q&A, how does high impact, low frequency work in high rainfall zone when half the property is off the limits for 4 to 5 months of the year?
Yeah, so that's about the planning, Jane, and then how much of the stocking rate. So we always had recoveries that were longer than what we needed. I went Southwest Victoria and in Tasmania as well. That you actually then have to allow for more slack, so you can skip them on a bit so that they don't pug those. Oliver, I'll come to that.
Okay, I'll park that question then.
Yeah.
Thank you. On with it.
Yeah, onwards and upwards. So what does work in practice? So like I've made some big statements, so let's do a bit of supporting stuff. The plants really don't care what recovery we're aiming for or what stocking rate. They're completely disinterested. So this is out of the Dairy Australia, and it's on perennial ryegrass. So they know that it's about leaf emergence. They understand that it's about how do these plants actually grow. So I've tried to put that in to think about it. The only problem is that the dairy industry grazes here. So, and that doesn't build landscape function because you don't get enough litter in the system. The litter is from these leaves dying. We seem to be completely frightened. I'll just turn that off. Completely frightened of things dying. It's like Rowan Reed saying, you know, if you want to manage a forest, you've got to chop trees down. You've got to kill them. Do you know? And it's the same in the grazing. If you want litter, you've got to let the plants, that oldest leaf die. And it's at the base of the plant. It's not at the bottom of the plant. There's a lot of confusion about that. So we need the root reserves replaced, and then we need to grow litter because it's litter that drives the major part of that nutrient cycling. There's three ways that carbon gets into the soil. So it's through the decomposing litter. It's the short-lived carbon cycle, but it drives a lot of your nutrient cycling. It's essential. So some people don't like it and don't think about it. You know, they go, oh, it's short-lived. It's, you know, it's from wasted grass. So they just don't do it. And the consequences are, I usually say we've got an experiment in Southwest Victoria that proves that 3-leaf ryegrass grazing doesn't work, and we call it the dairy industry. So, because what happens is the plants don't get enough recovery. You're not building that litter. You've got to put in so much inputs to grow the grass that then people start thinking it's economically viable to start feeding them as well as giving them grass, which doesn't, which increases the intensity and lowers profit. So there's really clear research on that from Lincoln in New Zealand and stuff. So it's this material I'm talking about at the bottom. It's about these leaves that are just starting to die off. That's perennial ryegrass. It's that leaf that I'm talking about. It's this that's on the soil between the plants. So I have a clear definition that when I work with people, it looks like an ungrazed plant. So there's no cut off tips. They're all in the litter, and it contains fresh yellow litter. That's when it's ready to be grazed. I'm saying let's check to see if that works for you. It depends on temperature and soil moisture, going back to Siobhan's point. So it and the previous management, you know, how much root reserves, energy they've got, which means we need to monitor. You know, so what I'm saying is these are the key factors that we need to look at. If we're going to build landscape function, we've got to grow litter, which means we need litter in the plants before we put the animals in. This is, you know, out of Alan's book. So I've just added some colour to put the litter into it. So that top left, the mature plant ready to be grazed will have litter in the base. Then the animals come. They're severe grazers. You know, like the animals do not graze the tips. If they nip the tip of one, then they'll come to another one and eat it to the ground. I think I've got some photos up later. So then the plant mobilizes its root reserves and starts putting up fresh leaf. If you came and grazed it on that bottom left, the fourth slide there, leaves are beginning to grow on energy from crown and roots. If animals return now, plant would be overgrazed. That's also where most people get animal health problems. So that's where you're going to get your metabolic diseases if they're eating plants that are of that age. The plants are full of what they call, Jerry Brunetti would call non-protein nitrogen, and they're quite toxic. They're usually high in endophytes and all those other problems. So if you're getting those sort of things, it's because the grass is too young. So then it starts to recover. So bottom middle slide, it's starting to recover, but it hasn't got fresh litter in it. You probably wouldn't kill that grass plant, but you would not create the conditions for that nutrient cycling and more plants. Most of what people are talking about is only focusing on single generations. So most of the grazing I see, they're very low recruitment of new plants and sort of just focusing on how do I make this plant the most palatable and healthy. I don't think like that. I'm thinking about profit and rainfall risk and market price risk. So, and then it's ready to be grazed when the leaves are fully regrown and nearly all the roots have been re-established. And just that line, you know, that quote from Alan, you know, we assume that it's been severe because some plants are always grazed severely, and thus we focus on the plant growth rate. So this is just a clip out of, this is talking about stock density and utilisation. So this is just a clip out of the David Attenborough Great Plains video. So all this grazing that we're doing, we always say that we're mimicking nature, and then we try and trick it by doing all sort of fancy stuff. And you know, one of my favourites is to talk about in Australia is that there's a lot of other trainers, not myself, go around saying, put them in when it's 2 beer cans high and take them out when it's 1 beer can high. Well, I don't think that makes any sense at all. Like, even though it's got beer in it, it doesn't mean it's right. You know, so that's not the way these animals grazed. When they were in these mega herds, they grazed like this photo. So this is just a screen clip out of that video. I'd get it and watch it and look at it and think about it. But look at that stock density. I see that as like a fire going through the grassland. You know, what's that stock density up there? It's incredibly high. There's no one there going along and saying to them, hey, we're down to 1 beer can high, we better get off. Everyone is just trying to get fed. So a lot of that really high utilization is competition within the herd, and everyone thinks that it's some sort of predator effect. These animals love to be together, they love to run in herds, but they compete to eat. And if you don't get up the front and try and push through, you're not going to get anything to eat. So it's just sort of a bit of a myth that.
And that's one of the reasons why all of the animals that we husband are similar to ourselves. So I've just got one from Greg Mum here, Graeme. Based on this practice, when great, because it portends to this vision you've got on the screen here, because this is just not one species necessarily. When grazing sheep and cattle together, should I follow the cattle with sheep directly after and then graze hard and increase recovery? Or the inverse of that question would be, would you just not have a flood where you have the cattle and the sheep to graze together at once?
So this Darren, is going to be my whole escalation idea. So start with one animal first, learn how to do this, then escalate to combinations, but I would run them together rather than separate. I would never have more than one mob. If they can't fit in the mob, then they need to be somewhere else. A lot of the time, I'm not sure about there would be other animals in that herd. You know, like when you watch the video, you don't see other animals in there. It's either wildebeest or whatever. I think that that's some of that mixing it up. So this is hard to explain, but everyone is surfing this diversity, and I'm not surfing it. Because I had this discussion with Colin Sykes, because we were doing multi-species cover cropping training, so we're having dinner of an evening, and what I said to him was, I think people are overemphasizing diversity. And he came back after in his usual calm way and said, I think you're wrong. And he didn't say it quite like that. But, and I said, you regenerated your place with sheep and red grass, Bothrocloa, and I regenerated the place in southwest Victoria with cattle and phalaris. There was no diversity. Get that right. Don't focus on more species. I'm saying it's too hard. You actually then make it complicated as well as complex, and the complexity goes exponential, and you can never work out what's going on. Sorry, I'll get back.
Yep, that makes sense.
I'll get back on track.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to deal with some of these associated questions, because some of them I'm putting on notice for later.
Yeah, sure.
So again, from Julie, so is ready to be grazed right before the grass goes to seed? For beginners, what do they look for?
They only look at the litter in the plant, not the seed head, not any of that. So has it got fresh litter in the base of the plant? And it's got to be this year's litter since its last graze. It's got to be fresh litter in the growing season. Yeah, so it's not about the seed heads. It's not about worrying about any of that stuff. It's about building the litter to build the landscape function. So,
And what, from Campbell Mercer, g'day Campbell, what sort of stock density constitutes high density?
Yeah, greater than 1,000 cows per hectare. So when I come to the safe to fail practice areas, I get people to run them at a sheep per square metre for the practice area and a cow per 3 square metres or 3 square yards. Because you need to know that you're over the threshold on the practice areas to make sure that you get to see what's happening. So it's got to be what's happening at this front. It's not this, it's this that's doing the work. This is the working front. This is what it all happens.
Yeah,
so,
and they're the hungriest animals with the greatest appetite. So
yeah, and know how to look after themselves. And we're actively trying to manage for those and selecting for those. So
the Andrew Bunny, which I think is a good one from the beer can analogy, is best analysis I have heard of is can hit down to crushed, not to canned. So crush the can if you're gonna. Well, and drink your can, because you do go to a lot of parties in the morning, and there's a lot of cans of beer that have not been completed. So yeah.
I love it.
And then Jan, similar question to the last one, but with sheep and chooks or chickens, can we run them together also? And I think that leads to your point about complexity and innovation.
Make it simple. With the beer cans, I just like that you cannot use height to determine whether a perennial grass is recovered.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been trying to put on my emails. Using height to determine recovery is like using height to determine people's age. I would be 12 and getting younger. So it's just illogical. You've actually got to look at in spring, the plant can be sort of 30 centimeters high or a foot high and not recovered. But in winter or in the slower growing, it might be well and truly recovered at that height. So you cannot use height or kilograms of dry matter per hectare, which I spent a lot of my life doing.
Yeah. All right. I might park some of the rest of these because there's quite a few that are building up, and we'll keep going, and then we'll come back again.
Okay. Yeah. So this is where I'm running a project at Naringla near where I'm camped at Araluen. And that's just the hill that we're grazing at the moment. I'm standing up on the hill. That's not with a drone. So it's quite steep. But they're grazing along that strip. And this is sort of what it looks like after they've come out of it. So I'll just get rid of those questions so I don't grab my eye. So it's what I was trying to show with this photo is that the soil is still covered in litter, but they've taken the green out of it. So that to me is, most people are forgetting that it's the litter you've got to leave. So when I'm thinking of putting the animals into the paddock, I'm looking, is there fresh litter in the base of the perennials? Then I graze them as hard as I can while still getting animal performance. And to do that, I use gut fills and dung scores and take them out on the animal. So in on the grass, out on the animal. And trying to show that that's very similar. That look there is very similar to what was in David Attenborough's Great Plains video. So that's what we do. So this is just another photo of the country and stuff that we're grazing. There's no back fence here. The water point's back here, just off to the thing, and there's no back fence. They've just been allowed a small strip forward, and that's the density that Peter grazes them at. So, so that you know that you're over the threshold. There's a threshold which the land regenerates, and I've got Jaime's slide up further showing what he did in Mexico.
Are these your cows from your old property, Graeme, or are they?
Yes, some of them are. So that one is. Only some of them. The rest are Peter's. So I've only got a few in his mob. So, but I was not going to keep them unless I could graze them in this way, because you need to graze them in this way to select them to graze in this way. So they will not. Most cows take time to adjust, and then you've got to almost go for the next generation, so that it becomes normal for them to be grazed at this sort of stock density. A few fall out. I usually say it's a bit like some people can move from the city to the country and thrive, some people can't, and some people can move from the country to the city and thrive, and some people can't. And it's the same idea. You've got to learn to socially be liked, bumped around, be competitive grazing, look after yourself, be able to have a calf and find your calf in that situation, the whole thing. So just another one. I just wanted to just get over this idea of graze the top third. It is not right, and the animals don't eat the plants down based on a height. They actually find a plant they like and eat it down. So this is out of Alan and Jodie's book, and it's just the horse had only been in there for 1 hour, but it had already found a plant it liked and eaten it down quite deeply. There's no decomposing litter in the land around there, so it hasn't got high landscape function. So I really feel like we need to put this to bed once and for all. And Andre Voisin, I just think he must be turning over in his graves, because people quote him as being one of the ones that agreed with the whole idea that you should only eat the top plant. And then I really like this. So he talks about the sigmoid curve and all that sort of stuff, which is in a lot of the training. And it's just not right. It's just not right, because below what he wrote there is this slide. And I really like this. I see this with so many things. It's perfectly sound. It's, it sounds like it's just so logical to eat the top part of the plant and move on, and then it'll recover quicker, so you can come back and you can carry more animals. And then, so that's what unfortunately we see here again, perfectly sound theoretical and scientific considerations running foul of practical obstacles. This is a really big issue with agriculture. We think we know what's going on, but we're not going out and checking, and which could not be foreseen a priori or prior to actually putting the animals in, because the cows have the habit of first grazing down the parts they prefer before going on to herbage they like less. So if that plant now has been severely grazed, that becomes your monitoring point, because that's usually one of the higher species, the more palatable grasses. You don't want to come back before that's fully recovered. So if you're not coming back before that's fully recovered, then I'm saying let's graze them all down quite heavily, getting back to Declan's question. And then, Johan, in his usual style, has just said this information is as useless as the recommendation that grass should not be defoliated close to the ground. The latter information may be of value one day when cattle have been taught to graze at an even height. Just a quick one on the utilisation. I just had a look at the time, so if I'm sorry for going on too long, but this is really important. It'll be in the notes that the left hand was grazed 2 or 3 times for over 12 years, and then one severe grazing, as Jaime calls it, followed by a full growing season rest. That's really important. Understanding some paddocks need full growing season rest. Gabe Brown looks at some of his paddocks, like that he keeps for 14 months and all that sort of stuff. So, so how do we actually do that? How do we mimic these things? How do we sort it out? I'm saying just do these small, safe to fail practice areas. So they're only grazed for a couple of areas. They don't, a couple of hours. They don't need water, and you need at least one at 6 months and one at 12 months. So when people are saying 40 days, I'm thinking that we need to venture out into the unknown and start looking at what does happen at 6 months, what does happen at 12 months. It might all go back to woody plants up at, where were we, Coffs Harbour or Byron Bay, but it may not. So with high stock density, it might stay at a grassland, if not. But if it starts to go woody, then you're not getting enough stock density and all that sort of stuff. But we've got to stop focusing on the one generation of the plants. So put the animals in. They need to be watched and monitored. Put them in the morning, not last thing of an evening. and you need to leave the soil surface covered, take photos and monitor. The monitoring that I'll send around is based on this. So I've tried to color code it. So the blues are the regenerating ones. So you throw a dart and then what did it land in? Did it land in bare soil that it's dying? Litter with no decomposition, it's not going anywhere. Slight decomposition, I've got a photo of slight decomposition on the next one. Litter fungal decomposition, it's been colonized by the beneficial fungi or a perennial grass base of the regenerating ones. Needs to be covered. We need to have maybe a couple of annuals, not a lot. We don't want any soil movement, and we want lots of other life. And then just name of the nearest perennial, what's the distance to it, what's its age, and then this how to measure the basal area. I'm putting a video together on how to measure the basal area. It was really clear people that had basal area coming out of the drought in New South Wales had extraordinary growth and are now fully set up for the winter where other people are already feeding up in southern New South Wales. This is the decomposing litter. So that's raw litter in the system on there, and it'll be going brown and starting to decompose. When it gets going really well, then it'll actually have fungal attack in it, like a compost heap or really healthy forest or bush floor. So same function things apply for this. I'll send out how to use this as well, but once you've got that form filled out, you can then come back and work out what was the cause and what's the corrective action to take. So, so if you've got bare ground between the plants, no raw litter, then you didn't grow the litter usually, or the animals can be picking up the litter, and then what to do. And I'll go through all 2 pages of this so that you can actually start to measure and then take action. So I think this is the blockage that a lot of people are getting. They're getting a result but they don't know, like, do I keep going? Do I need to redesign? What's the whole changes that I need to make? If you've got grey and oxidizing plant or woody plants, or I need to extend it a little bit because people want to know about rushes. So a successful design is something like this. This is a farm family that it goes really well. So they have 80% equity in the land and no debt on the cows. So when they buy a new property, they just get agistment cows and set stop them until they breed up their own because they have problems with selection. They have long recoveries, and their cost of production is so low that that's how they cope with those different levels of risk. So the seasonal risk is covered because with the long recoveries, you get enough leaf emergence to always be putting them back onto recovered grass. So you get to link up those rainfalls and temperature events to make sure that you don't run out of grass, because grazing only fails when you run out of grass. The other thing that when I went and did all my surveys and sort of trying to work out, well, why were the people I was training, why was it so patchy? Why was it consistently around the world that only 5% of people that are trained in this sort of management are successful? And what I found was that they became their own expert. So after 10 to 15 years, the ones that were successful had actually shifted the complexity and they'd constrained it, they'd squashed it a little bit. They tended to be very good observers, so they still had their practice areas, but a lot of them had gone to one mob with one big long recovery. So not mucking around too much. They'd squash the complexity, and there's always a danger if you squash complexity that it's going to ooze out between your fingers, just so that they can get a hold on it. But they're also using the practice areas to check, have things changed? Do I need to be changing what I'm doing? Because if you squash complexity, eventually it will fail. So if the rainfall doubled or the rainfall halved, or the frequency of drought changes, something will come along, and then you'll have to reassess and you'll have to move back in to the complex area. So that's what people are doing. I'll put this graph's probably too busy for now, but these are sort of the what I see as sort of the benefits of high impact, low frequency versus low impact and continuous. So it has a lower rainfall risk. it tends to keep money in the bank over time because it has that lower rainfall risk and a lower intensity, which reduces all those seasonal risks, the market price risks, have higher landscape function and biodiversity, massively improved animal health. You know, you get with the other one, you get some animal health issues and a lot with continuous. Animal performance is probably not as quick, but you've got to start then selecting animals. So I'm put that as a negative there, that the current animal population is being selected for the continuous grazing, and the low impact, high frequency suits the animals better. But if we're going to live on this planet, we're going to have to shift off this whole, these are the right animals. I think I really like Angus cattle, and they've been selected for feedlot performance, not for regenerating landscapes, which is what we need them for. The farmers tend to have higher wellbeing scores. There's some research on that, but you do need a lot of paddocks. You need a heap of paddocks per mob. So I'm saying, you know, around about that 200 seems to be where you need to come in, whereas a lot of other people talk about 30 to 40. That'd sort of work if you stayed in each one of those for 10 plus days if they're all the same, but otherwise you're going to need more paddocks. So in my mind, and this is what I want you to check with your safe to fail and going around and looking at who works and who doesn't, is that I see that on balance, that lower risk, more profit and the land and soil health is higher weighting than having to try and get animal performance and selecting for that. So, and Johan Zeitsman's got really good stuff in his Man, Cattle and Veld on selecting animals, and Heine's also very good and focused on this. Just quickly some evidence. This is sort of where I'm running this project at the moment with Peter. So they started, this is ground cover as measured from the satellite, and it's just run through an algorithm to sort of make sure that you're including the litter as well as the green material. So pre-training, they were consistently lower in ground cover than their neighbours. After training, they sometimes were higher, but it was pretty random, very hard to keep money in the business during this period. And then Peter and I have been working together since here, and even during the drought, we've had pretty good results. I won't go, I was going to talk about the coaching program, but basically on a weekly basis, we do things like make sure that we're checking in on email. So this is with a guy I'm working with, Alex, who's also a member of Regrarians, and making sure that we have a catch up on a Friday. I get an email from Alex just saying, what's going on, what's happened, what was the cause of the variation, what are you going to do to fix it? And then it allows us to feedback and discuss. So these are some of the things. Has the litter decomposition changed? What are the gut fill scores? What are the dung scores? The contentment scores and drinking scores. And we overlay that with some of that dart throwing and measuring that. So I won't go through the ad, but just sort of, I'll put that out in the notes, that if people wanted to join the coaching program, we do small groups and one-on-ones, and there's weekly emails and phone calls and set up plans, safe to fail, so that it actually is successful. I then had a few ads up here, just sort of testimonials. So I really like this one. I was rolling drunk with happiness. It's got a nice link back to the beer, and it's shifted. So before and after photos, sort of working with Lynn Heenan in Southwest Victoria, and also another one from the Reeds in Gippsland at Perry's Bridge there. So and they've done the cell grazing and holistic management, and it wasn't until they'd been with me they realised they're not allowing sufficient recovery time for our pastures to be, wasn't enough to be regenerative. I'm happy to do one-on-one, so try before you buy for people, and that's on the website. So you can either book that or just drop me an email or whatever and say, can you do this time? See if we can work out some stuff. And that's just to see if it's going to work. If that style of working together works for you. So, sorry, skip through that. Went a little bit long. Sorry about that. So, how's that going, Gary?
Oh, we're doing very well. It was great to see Lynn Heenan there. I think she's one of my dear wife's cousins because
Oh, okay.
they're
Oh, yeah.
Lisa's family, when they arrived from Ireland 160 odd years ago, walked from Adelaide to Coleraine.
Yeah.
As a few people of our particular descent had to.
Yeah.
And it was a nice walk, apparently. Anyway, with their wheelbarrows.
Yeah.
And,
As long as you didn't
yeah,
have to rush, it'll be all right.
and Lynn stayed. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got a bit of a board of questions. We might get through some of those, Graeme. So if I'll read those out. So this is from Marco. There are some guys strip grazing, moving huge herds, moving every hour. Would moving so quickly have an adverse effect on manure cover?
No, that's the problem's not with the manure cover. The manure, I worry that we've got a little bit too much focus on manure as being the way we fertilize the soil. So it's almost like, well, I'm not putting fertilizer on where's it's coming from. Most of the nutrient cycling comes from the standing on the litter and getting that to decompose and feed the soil life. So that's where most of the nutrient cycling comes from. So you don't have to have the whole landscape covered with dung or manure. The problem with moving too frequently, shifting large mobs frequently is like a PhD in grazing management, because you can actually upset the time that they're ruminating and you can actually damage the performance of the animals. You've got to be finely tuned to allowing them to sit or stand and ruminate. So they need to be filled up. So if you're moving them at that stock density, typically they like a big breakfast and a big meal of an evening. So I focus on moving them more frequently on that time. So so it's really not about the manure. It's more about making that they're sure that they've got time to eat and to ruminate, because it's only when they're ruminating that they're really making milk and meat and fat. So.
Next one is by mimicking, this is from Ricardo, by mimicking nature as in the picture from the Great Plains, wouldn't you prioritize soil and maybe the plants, maybe the animals would starve a little, not necessarily in an unhealthy way? I mean, animals should enter in a regime of limited feed to get in that behaviour. Interesting one.
Yeah. Oh, we're not trying to limit their feed, Ricardo. What we're trying to do, and that's why I use that gut fill. What's going to happen here if I do this?
You can just exit and go to gut fill if you've got that there, mate.
So we use gut fill. God, I know it's down here somewhere. We use this idea. Is that showing? Is it?
Yeah, that's fine, mate. Thank you. Just pop it on the screen. Yep, that's beautiful. Yep. Thank you.
Yes,
we had a question about that as well. So I'll
so we use this idea of have they had enough to eat. So that's score 4 and score 5 down the bottom. This is on that red triangle on that black and white dairy cow there. So it's on the left-hand side, and it's a bit of a window into the rumen, and so you can use that to assess whether they're going okay or not. So we actually make sure that we're looking at the gut fills on an average for the whole herd. So some animals that don't suit, they just need to go. If they can't get with the program, then they need to go, and you need to select animals that look after themselves and are very, very low maintenance. When that triangle there is just becoming obvious, then when 20% of our cows would just be showing that sort of level of hollow there, not like the black and white cow, we would shift them. So that worked well in our grass, with our management, with our stock. So you need to work out, well, what are the scores and what percentages that work for me? So score 4, there's no sign of the triangle. Score 3, there's just the sign. So a percentage of them will be ready to move when they're like that. And then you can use the dung scores to predict the animal health, but also how they're going. So If it's like green paint score 1, then the grass is far too young and you'll end up with animal health problems. Score 2 for too long on cows and you'll end up with calf scours because you change the pH of the rumen and the scarf. It's not the best score 3 photo. It should be a pie with a dip in the middle. It gives you good animal performance and good animal health. So you're trying for that dung consistency all year round. And it's the same, you can do the same with sheep. So once you've got the scoring, it's actually quite easy to work out what's going on in terms of the animal health, because if you maintain those really nice dung scores, you'll actually maintain good solid animal performance as well as good and excellent animal health.
The KM on the chat said, can we do the gut fill on sheep? And I would say it's for any ruminant.
Yes, you can, KM, but the problem is when they're in full wool, it's a bit hard to see.
Yeah, visibility.
And you have to change. So
goats you certainly can as well.
Yeah. So I'd get your eye in with the sheep when they're off shears so that you start to see how they behave. And when the sheep are going really well, they'll be bright, they'll be energetic. There's a fine wool merino breeder at Dunkeld, and he said to me, once I started doing this and giving them grass that was older and feeding them properly, the lambs would be, he'd normally do a run around to pick up the dead lambs on the morning. Whereas now when he goes out, he said the lambs are playing chasing. So I really like that idea.
Yeah, beautiful. What have we got next? Thanks to from Costa Georgiadis for the great quality of sound and visuals, like being in the room. Oh, there you go. or in the van, as it were. From David Brown, what is more detrimental, delaying a move out of a paddock and risk overgrazing versus shifting into new paddock before grass is fully recovered? From David.
Yeah, so we probably need to be really clear on what the definition of overgrazing is. There's a lot of confusion between high utilization and overgrazing. High utilization, that there's only litter left that you can see, is not overgrazing. And overgrazing is when the plant has regrown leaf area from root reserves and then you eat that. Can I skip back or?
Yeah, go for it. You should be able to. You might have to go back into the...
let me see. So, where are they hiding?
So my question, when are you going to deliver the rest of this presentation to us, Graeme? Not to put you on the spot or anything.
I do.
And thanks to Graeme and Darren. This is from Greg Hart. He's our friend and partner in New Zealand. Best wishes from the family farm in beautiful Mangarara Station.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I do like a few extra slides up my sleeve. So, so this is where overgrazing occurs. So the leaf that's grown off this plant has actually been grown from root reserve energy. So it's that carbohydrates from the roots that's pushed this leaf up. If you graze this, that's overgrazing. So you can go right down here. So that's not overgrazing. It's only if the leaves grow back. So the reality is that you do need to have feed for the animals. So if you keep them, I would stay as long as you're getting gut fill scores. And you might have to push them a little bit harder. The problem is always moving too fast. It's never moving too slow. So with this management, we're only ever looking to see if we're overstocked, never worrying about being understocked, because all you do is reduce the size of the strip. So you can't be understocked because you can always get animal performance. I don't like cells. People cannot make cells work. I can only recommend that we do trials on doing the strip grazing, only having a front fence. They can walk back to the water. I was trained by Alan and things like that. I believe that cells are anachronistic and they're too hard for people to work out how much of the farm have I grazed today. So on Peter Reynolds' place, what we're doing is, all we're looking at is If he wants 12 months recovery, has he grazed, about 300, 365th of the area?
All right, there's a couple of points there. One from Celia. Hi, Celia. Lovely to see your name come up. Your cursor is not showing, so I don't know what's going on there. And many thanks for the presentation. Like Darren, I'm looking forward to the next instalment. There you go. And from Costa, Graeme is beyond prepper with that many spare slides tucked away in his safe room. You should see what he's got in his gun cupboard. And Stephen Schmidt's totally great knowledge from both champions of change, your regenerative bunch. Green hug to you all. And from Richard Doherty, spelled another way. A great presentation, Graeme. Thanks for putting it together. So let's maybe get to the next question. Can an extremely high density, stock density interact well with silver pasture?
Ooh. Oliver, yeah, I can't see why not. So that's what the grasses actually need. That's what they evolved with, was extremely high stock density and high utilization, as I was trying to show. So if we're going to mimic those grasslands, then...
well, if I could answer that too, because I'm probably more of a silver pastoralist than you are, Graeme, I might say. We won't go there. I mean, ultimately what you're doing there is your focus is on the grass. It's not on the trees so much. So the trees are a shade component. They're a component of the system. Yep. But the dominant, what's feeding the animals and what is driving landscape function is the grassland, it's not the tree system. So.
And then, and where we've managed under trees like that, we had full grass cover, full soil cover right up to the base of the trees. So.
Joe has said a flirt is all well and good, but how do you keep the bloody dorpers in with a single hot wire? Mine have interbred with wombats and kangaroos and seem impervious to electricity. At least the cattle can be managed easily with a single hot wire and shifted daily. Well, these are all the things that lead around. I mean, it's quite funny, but at the same time, this is the complexity that you mentioned, because you've got to get into more complex fencing and deal with all of the needs of everything.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah.
Okay. From Herdis, pardon me if I've got your pronunciation wrong. Hi, what do I do with the leftovers after grazing? Do I mow or mulch or not do anything? I don't think we're not leaving too many leftovers.
Yeah, I'm suggesting that we don't leave any leftovers, but if you do, it's just to leave it. It's sometimes at different times of the year, like if you're they've just calved or they've just lambed or kidded or whatever, and you're wanting to put condition on them to get them back up for joining, you'll be focusing then on the animals, and you might have to leave some over, but it's not a problem. With that high stock density, the next time you go around, you'll put it back on the ground. So it's really not sort of using any fossil fuels is what I'm talking about. That's the lowest cost, lowest risk thing to do. If you want to regenerate your land, that's where we start, because I've tried to develop this idea and I'm struggling with slides and everything. But, so what's the lowest cost, lowest risk, most profitable thing to do? Start there, keep going at that for, 3 to 5 years. If you can't, then you escalate up to the next step. Are you going to broadcast seed? Are you going to resow perennial grasses? So, are you going to try the cover crop? But you've got to do the lowest cost, lowest risk thing, because you're going to need those skills in the future anyway. But everyone wants to jump up to something like cover cropping before they've actually worked out how to actually make the grazing work. We regenerated heaps of country from bare ground. Just by doing grazing. So it's really important that you actually know how to do this. So this is what we started with, cape weed and bare ground. So it had been cropped, it hadn't been resown, grazed within an inch of its life. I can say that there won't be anyone on from Southwest Victoria. The neighbours into it. So, but within 15 months, we'd actually regenerated it so that we had clear runoff. So it's about knowing how to do this. So how do you take that? This is my drought photos. So we grew grass like that because the plants had really good root reserves. Other people locked up hay paddocks in this drought and didn't get any growth. And then we fed the animals. We carried sort of 2/3 of our normal stocking rate through until it rained in January. We got clear runoff. There's our cows in the background there, and we grew this feed on it. When I took that photo I was working for our Department of Agriculture, the DPI in Hamilton. They all got stuck into me and said, "Oh, Graeme, what's the palatability of that?" And that was when I came back with a lot higher than dirt. So this was what they were recommending. So this was the difference between what we had and hadn't spent any money. These people had spent over $30 per sheep. This had been locked up since October. This was the demonstration site for high input fertiliser. So they're quite stark and quite different, I would argue. And we had clear water runoff.
Right. It looks like Ashley Ryan said, it looks like how my family grazed, tuning in from southwestern Victoria. See, you had to say that, Graeme.
I always
right.
get somehow.
That's right. That's right. So the other question just on that too, Graeme, would be that, or point would be that in my observation, if your animals or if your stock density is not sufficient to get non-selective grazing, is where you might have a few standing weeds left behind, and it's up to you then as to decide whether to have a crack at them or not.
Yeah, and I've never worried. Like we had full thistles, full cape weed, full everything. So, and I think we need to start changing our approach to weeds. The problem is never too much weed. The problem is not enough good, strong perennial grass.
Mm.
So my whole focus is ignore that, go all zen on the weed. And you can't do this everywhere, but in a practice area, get in there, grow grass and see what happens. I get a lot of problems. All the annual forby weeds, cape weed, thistles, Patterson's curse, all those are really, they're sooks as soon as you start focusing on growing grass. It's harder with woody weeds, and it's also harder with some of the perennial grass weeds like African love grass. Serrated tussock's a piece of cake. Chilean needle cake grass is a piece of cake. African love grass is a bit more of a problem because we've taken out a lot of the summer growing grass competition.
I've just added a quote from my old friend Bill Hill. I don't know if you know Bill.
Yeah, I know Bill.
Yeah, we've got to stop killing things that want to live and growing things that want to die. So most people don't realise that weeds actually have botanical names. They're actually called plants. All right. So Tom Rasmanis has got, having followed Graeme's work for 12 months, I'm still struggling to find a regenerative grazing model for small acreages, so sub 50 acres. And he's in the lower Hunter Valley in New South Wales. So the challenges are not being able to selectively breed for good grass conversion. Following that, how to source yearlings from grass-fed managed grazing breeders. Third, at some point with a small number of animals, the equation for grazing herd impact breaks down. E.g., it's not feasible to squash 10 animals into 100 square meters. Well, feasible is the operative question there, point there. And options moving forward, destock, except the fact that I don't have appropriate land for it. And second, do some rotational grazing across the land, but not to the level that Graeme would do, e.g. doing some rotating is at least a small improvement on set stocking. Well, that's an interesting point in itself. So
Yeah. So, Tom, um, it is hard to breed for that, and I'm thinking Celia Leviton down in the Huon Valley. She's got animals on at the moment, and she's had to go and buy them and keep searching until she got animals that would be suitable or the best that she could get, anticipate. And then, but she's grazing them at that stock density, and it's just using laneways with the water at the back, that fencing design. Let me see.
Yeah.
So,
Which both you and I do pretty similar on that, Graeme.
yeah, so it's really, this is the design I'm strongly recommending. So having sort of semi-permanent hot wires on each side with the animals, with the water at the back, and then just moving that front fence forward. So you need two fences, usually three. Three works better. I've found you don't end up chasing them all over the countryside like I was the other day. Um, and then uh, and then just move them up that strip, and they can always get back to the water and then bring them to the next strip. That works like a dream. So,
Could I just add into
that
that question though, Graeme? There are a lot of people who have smaller farms who are going to try and manage livestock, and this is where it really, this is one of the problems, I suppose, of having smaller landscapes when we're dealing with ultimately migratory animals. So, how is it and this goes to Tom's point, and I know a number of others that would be on here. If you've got that 50 to 100 acre property or smaller, and you want to hold on to a breeding herd, which a lot of people want to have that continuity.
yes,
How do you do that whilst advancing regeneration?
yeah. So
So the single mob is certainly one element of that, I would have thought.
yeah, so having a single mob, we know our heifers never ever left the mob, and that for some reason that drives people crazy. And people would go, "Well, you've got to take them out and grow them faster, or yeah, join them separate to a different bull." I go, "No, that's not the design that works for me." So nearly all designs are right in context, but if you want a context of reducing your workload, regenerating your land, being profitable, you can't start doing all that complexity. So what we do is never take those heifers out of the mob. We used nose rings to wean them, and they just never left. But you've got to keep the breeders at below 50% of the carrying capacity, because you need that flexibility. It's how nimble you are at reducing your stocking rate is how profitable you will be. So I used to think this was all about the grass. I had an incredible fixation and looking at the grass, and it's taken me 20 years to work out that it's not about the grass, it's about the people. Have they got enough of a buffer in there to react in time? And have they got the animal enterprise design such that they can reduce the stocking rate? So everything we're doing is about that enterprise design. You know, like I work with people with organic beef cows, they will not sell them. So they've got to be, this carrying capacity has got to be less than half. And then they either hold on to the calves and grow them out if it's a good year, or sell all the calves at weaning if it's a poor year. So they buffer with that sort of system. There's a really big problem with the direct delivered beef in that it actually increases your rainfall risk. Not many people actually getting onto that, that sort of, because they're trying to hold them to finish them for the business, and they end up holding them longer than they should. So, yeah, so there's a lot to do in that sort of stuff. But if you're interested in that sort of stuff, I'd be happy. I'd be happy to do that on the half-hour call or whatever that we do, or maybe I do some more webinars. I don't know.
We've had a few people who've done that direct marketing, and to overcome the problem of having animals in a finished condition all of the time is to have a strong ground beef market.
Yeah,
Because if you have ground beef, sausage, whatever it's going to be, then the mastication, which is part of the eating experience, which is what you're doing with finishing, is taken over by a machine, at least partly.
yeah.
So I'll Thanks. So yeah, I'm sure that there's more in that from Tom, but I think you've dealt well with that, Graeme. Thank you. Because we've got a lot more to go through. That one's dealt with Karen. Can these ideas be used with trading stock? How quickly do these animals learn to graze like this? I think you did answer that in part, but it'll be good to come back to that.
Hi, Lucy. There's a real problem in that if you buy animals that have really high maintenance energy, they'll never perform in there. But otherwise, they're incredibly quick. I used to get the wildest animals in, and then I just manage them in the yards for a bit, do a bit of the low stress stock handling, get them used to electric fence, and then into the cows. So I'm thinking of these Murray Greys that sort of had a bigger flight zone than our whole farm. I said they started running when I woke up, and but that took 2 days. So to eventually they go, oh well, and then they were quite happy to heads down and eating.
The question then is those animals, which is part of a big discussion that you've been having for some time, is that those animals aren't necessarily adapted well to grazing.
Yeah, no, they're designed to be fed. So.
Yeah, which is unfortunate.
Mm.
This is from Marco. I've heard a good rule of thumb to start conditioning cattle is non-selective to start conditioning cattle to non-selective grazing is 10% of the herd size in hectares, e.g. 100 cows in 10 hectares in 7 days. Is this a valid idea?
No, not really, Marco. It's sort of got so many variables in there, like how long was the grass recovered, the whole thing. So I'd be sort of getting the animals, trying to get them used to electric fencing strips, then you've got to monitor. So is the grass recovered in front of them, and use the gut fill and dung scores and start increasing the stock density and see how they react. There'll be some pop out the back. Like they've got to be at a density that their behavior changes. So when I'm explaining this, I get people to stand in the corner of the room and what part of the room. So it's usually like once they get to about an eighth of the room that we're training in, keep halving the room size, they start to giggle and carry on because they're get noisy because they've inside one another's personal space. And that gives you that idea of the stock density. So you get them trained up, used to electric fencing, start winding them up and decreasing the size that they get. But they can choose to go forward when you haven't got a back fence, and that allows a few of them to adapt and learn. So.
Yeah. This is a good one from Glenn Murrells. Thank you, Glenn. 20% debt on land is fine if you're long established and a generational farmer. It will take a while to attain 80% equity at current land values when starting out. I think 50% is more achievable for first generation farmers. Yep. And I mean, the other thing to that is that a lot of people who come from a low equity position are going to look at leasing and other land access options as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it is hard, but that's where you've got to be heading. You can't be stuck at 50 because your debt exposure is too high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But yep, good point. Marco again, would having a big mob affect a bull's effectiveness, or can we just keep adding bulls to keep the ratio?
Yeah, so we just add bulls to keep the ratio. I'm thinking of a family at Holbrook, that have got 2,000 cows in the mob, and they just put in the right ratio of bulls into that mob. But they're very good at managing the bulls. They've all sort of spend a lot of time together. They know who's chief, who's not, and they also manage for other things as well.
And so, for those people who are new to this business, Graeme, what are the ratios that you and your clients generally work with?
Yeah, well, it depends. It's really it's people specific, but 1 to 50, that sort of type thing, maybe more. It depends on the bulls, what sort of feed, what condition the bulls are in.
Yeah, great. When you're planning this is from Ryan Hill. When you're planning a grazing system for a new property where the pasture is in a poor state, would you plan for it, accept a cycle of overgrazing in cycle time, and make adjustments from there, or plan to undergraze and increase stocking as carrying capacity increases.
Yeah, good stuff, Ryan. What you do is you put in your safe to fail practice areas and work out what is the recovery this land needs. So say it came out at 9 months, let's say 12 months. It came out at 12 months. You know, you've got 13 paddocks. You've got to be a month in each paddock. You would only put in enough animals to be that month in each of those paddocks. And then as the feed grew in front of you, you would start to add animals. But this is one of those ones that you add animals incredibly slowly, but you take them out incredibly quickly. So, you've got your parameters, you've got your evidence of what the recovery needs to be. So therefore, you can actually start to say, well, that means I've got to be in this area for this long. So it's not accepting overgrazing at any time, and it's trying to get all those other things, that high stock density and stuff. You can finish animals on incredibly poor feed and things like that if you're looking at the gut fills and dung scores and you know what you're doing there.
From Chris Wood, do you need to fully exclude wildlife like kangaroos, wombats, and I would extend that to deer and any other non-crop animals, wildlife?
It's almost impossible to do, but gee, it makes a big difference. Like where you've got roos and wild deer and everything coming in and grazing. So,
well, it's a big question of cost, and a lot of obviously the cost of fencing has come down significantly thanks to a variety of innovations. But it's still a big cost, and a lot of people, what they're doing is community fencing now. So particularly in parts of out Queensland and whatnot, where they'll a few landholders will get together and put in exclusion fencing. But it's certainly, I mean, I've seen it where people have done it and then they haven't managed inside. So you still, it's not, and so you can see very clearly then that like the fence is not a proxy is not a replacement for your management.
Yeah, which is why I was trying to talk about the escalation idea as well.
Yeah.
So yarn, is it?
Yep, yarn. Yep. Any special considerations in extremely arid environments? 100 to 200 millimeter average rainfall, highly variable. I rarely see decomposing litter. It seems like everything stays so dry after 330 days of the year. I think yarn works a lot on Baja California or the California Peninsula.
There's a real thing, yarn, that you've got to, I've been working in California as well, and we've got to get back to perennial grass. So annual litter is not as good as a perennial grass litter, and annual grasses aren't as good as perennial grasses. So we need to shift it to the perennial grasses and perennial grass litter. And then in your practice area, you would get really focused. So in these practice areas, you haven't got any variables. All you're trying to do is increase the landscape function. And then I see it as a bit like Mythbusters. You keep going until you've worked out how to make it work. And then you stop and say, can I make a business out of that? So this is about that design for your environment and that variation in landscape. But yeah, it does happen, and it will happen. We're working with people in similar conditions in Western New South Wales.
Yeah. Angela Keith, due to a lack of water, we had to sell off our cows while we kept our sheep mob. Now we have a bit of tall grass dying and oxidizing. I don't mind, but it would be better to slash the. Would it be better to slash the grass and get the litter close to the ground, or would we just leave it? Cattle prices are just too high where we are at the moment.
Yeah. Angela, like this is this escalation idea. If you don't have to get the tractor out and you can do it with an animal, then it turns an expense into an income. And everything that we do, we need to turn expenses into income. So, like I work with small landholders as well, and I'll say it's better to borrow the animals and do it with the animals than to get the mower out or the slasher or the brush cutter. So,
provided you're set up for that. So because the other thing, I mean, I've experimented with this over time as well, and you see that maybe using the mower once, it gets you ground cover, especially using something like a flail mower. It gives you immediate ground cover, etc. But then there's no replacement for the interaction of a herbivore with its manure, its saliva, its urine, etc. With a grass than a mechanical mouth. You really do. Yeah. So you might be able to get away with it for a year, but after that. And this is from Nicole Horder. Is the gut feel the same with sheep, visually notwithstanding the fleece? I think we answered that before.
Yes.
Stephen Schmitz. There is some trials being done in our area on feeding biochar. One was on a dairy, and the report was saying that after 9 months there was a change in soil CO2 or carbon. I'm not sure there. Because that would suggest there was a change in CO2 respiration by saying CO2. It is now being sold to local beef growers as a way forward to get better soil healthy. What are your thoughts, please?
I like that. You've been reading my texts and stuff, so you can translate. I refuse to do. Yeah. Again, I would be doing my whole thing, and I've done presentations with e-laning and things like that, and I just say, divide one of your safe to fail practice areas in half, put the product X on one side and not on the other, and then put it on an area that's managed perfectly. Don't put it on an area out in the paddock that's not managed well. Do it in a safe to fail. So it's managed perfectly. Was it worth it to put on that much time, that much money, that much effort to put that product on half of it versus the performance of the other side? The people I work with, once they do that, they then go, oh no, I'm just going to focus on the grazing. So.
Yeah, and the other thing is, and this goes to your low input cost thing as well, Graeme, is that it's all an additional cost. What's the cost benefit, and that goes into your whole monitoring.
Yep.
So this is from Joe Caminiti. I found last winter that I had a lot of very dry annual grasses, and the cattle had good gut feel but were losing condition. I gave them some bypass protein dry season lick blocks and found their condition improved dramatically on the dry feed. Is this an issue with perennial grasses, or do you have a better protein throughout the year, unlike annuals that dry off?
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry, I was reading the wrong Joe one. She's on the
Yeah.
Q&A. Yeah, they will. A lot of the time, that dry feed is only maintenance feed, Joe. So you have to really make it work. You've got to try and get to the better grasses. The better perennial grasses dry off with more nutrients in them than the annuals do. So that's where you're heading, but you may have to take interventions along the way, although I'd be trying to avoid it. So,
would that not have partly be to like a number of animals, as again you've discussed, Graeme, are not bred to be not fed, and so that's something. So I mean, a lot of our advice, and similar with Johan and Jimmy, Jaime Elizondo Brown, for example, is that ultimately you should have animals which are highly adapted to your situation and the feed and forages that are available. Yeah. In the short term, however, it may be that you need to evaluate protein supplementation in order to be able to get to that low input goal. Would that be reasonable?
Yeah, it could be, but again, it needs to be one of those, you've got to check whether it's in context for you. So we took bare ground and cape weed and just managed the animals with that. So we didn't supplement at all on the way back into that grass. So we had didn't have a tractor, didn't have any way of feeding them, didn't have any money. So so it is really context specific. And you can do it without, but it's not easy, and you've got to react to what's in front of you.
Okay. This is not a silly question, Dory. Does perennial grass grow everywhere?
Yeah,
Not even on very degraded lands.
yeah, it does. Perennial grass will grow anywhere, and really sometimes I'm thinking of Gabe Brown. He does 2 years of covers to prime the soil on a really degraded spot to get it ready to put it back to to prairie, as he'd say. So, but he doesn't do. You can't cover crop your way into profit. You can only use it for short steps unless you're doing cash cropping.
And when you're saying priming, Graeme, what you're saying there is getting the carbon levels up, getting the landscape function up such that it's in a better condition for a landscape that might only host annual grasses now, but now will be able to host and maintain perennials.
Yeah, starting to get some life into it, getting more of that higher fungal ratio, all those things.
Because there was a question there earlier, which I didn't see who it was from. They didn't have their name, but about getting perennial grasses established in places like Southern California, where I know, having worked with Gunnar Tautram over the journey, Gunnar's just north of Santa Barbara there, and he's tried a whole range of things in order to be able to get perennial grasses growing there or re-established, with the supposition that perennial grasses once existed in that landscape. And we've heard this same sort of thing in southeastern Australia as well, and in southwestern or in southern Western Australia and South Australia as well. So the supposition there is that upon settlement there were no perennials growing in those areas. It was only annual grasses.
Yeah, which is, like I took photos of, driving back all through the Nullarbor. It's still all covered with perennial grasses. It's just all grey and oxidising.
Thanks from Phil Ronacker. Thanks, Graeme and Darren. Looking forward to the next session. High school ag teacher Phil. Thanks, Phil.
Oh, no.
I had a great Mr. Turner, Garth Turner. His name was Sir. He was our high school ag science teacher, and everyone attended his classes because everyone got an A. So it was like this at Flora Hill High back in the day, and but you had to get an A by being able to name every beef and sheep breed in Australia, which were blazoned everywhere. So, and he'd ask you on a whim, but it was the only A I ever got. So Joe Caminiti, I have a small holding with only 3 cattle, but have muddled my way through with daily hot wire shifts in 7 small paddocks. For gut fill, the heifer has to be full, with the steer part full, and the bull always looking slightly hollow, and it's time to move. If they are laying down in the morning chewing their cud, they have had enough. If they are standing or grazing, they need more. If they are staring through the lounge room window looking for movement in the house, the fence needs moving, and I need to give them a bigger strip. Well, it sounds like that's thorough domestication. Costa, of course. So did you ever get an A? You answered that before. Yes, I did. Thanks. It was a plus, actually, Costa. And yes, we can validate this story and more. Thank you very much. Well, the Bondi Gallery is large and going. All right, Cynthia Simmons. Hello, Graeme. Is regenerative grazing for perennial monocultures like vineyards similar? We are hoping to get a small mob of sheep and 2 cows to assist with keeping grass down and for manuring. Is that it, Cynthia? Could I just ask, is that using cows in a vineyard as well?
In the interrow, I think.
Yeah, I haven't heard of anyone doing cow grazing in vineyards as yet.
Yeah, in Tasmania, I think they're almond trees. I don't know. But like just had to use the electric fence, strategically to keep them off the trees. So
yeah, it's been interesting, Cynthia. We've I'm working as a consultant as Graeme is with the Landsmith organisation in Western Australia, and they have been doing grazing in their vineyards at the Voyager estate for a couple of years now, and doing it quite well. And the conversation, it'll be interesting to hear from Graeme if you've had a look at this when you've been over there. The conversation has been with the vineyards as to trying to time the grazing such that it meets the context of the vineyard, right? And so, because my discussion with them was, all right, well, let's try and manage the grazing so that it's good for the sheep and it's good for landscape function.
Yeah.
But then their context is, well, we're vineyard first. Grazing is a proxy for using a flail mower.
Yeah.
So how do we approach that, Graeme?
Oh, well, again, it's that same, you're going to have to do the work is really the thing on how do you actually make that work. So, sorry. Yeah, so, but you can do all these things, but it's actually going to be hard work. But they need to do something with their soil surface, and they're just trying to work that out. So.
Costa's talking about fake news now. Anyway.
I've probably got to head off very shortly.
No
Jack.
worries. Well, we've got to. Yeah, there's a lot more questions. So perhaps this is a good moment to thanks to Pablo Borelli. Lovely to hear from you too, Pablo in South America. There. There's another person who's done a lot with landscape function and in the various modes with the Land to Market program and the fantastic ecosystem outcome verification program that they've developed. Look, it's probably a good opportunity for us to park some of these questions and have you deliver the other 300 pages on this slideshow, Graeme. We'll try and do that. I'll try and nudge Graeme in while we're off air and see if we can get something else going on because there's obviously a lot of people who are very interested in this topic. Yeah. In the meantime, if you are interested in working with Graeme, then there's information. The information that we've got from this slideshow and the support documents and the recording of this webinar will become available to you. And we'll send that to all of the people who've registered. Otherwise, you can join us on the Regrarians Workplace on the 1-month trial, and we'll have the information put there as well. But thanks so much, Graeme. It's been really great to hear you and see your new abode.
Yeah. Thanks for organising and getting me on, and thanks to everyone for attending. It's been great.
No worries.
Big
all
set.
right.
Thank you.
Gee, we've got a lot more questions to go. So
can you send them to me? Or?
Yeah, I'll do what I can to. I think it all saves them all. I think it does. So I'll do what I can there.
Yeah, and then I might just do voice to text. So it mightn't have a lot of grammar and stuff in it.
Yeah,
so
no worries.
And I'll belt through them to people.
Okay.
But or if you want to just send me an email and get into my system, and we can go from there.
Yeah, or we can just do a quick Q&A online sometime. It's a webinar. Yeah. That's easy to do.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much, Graeme, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for your time.